This video was sponsored by Skillshare.
What's up? This week in the shop, got kind of a little crazy challenge going on. I gotta turn this entire stack of white oak into a 5-foot wide round coffee table with round legs, and I only have a day and a half to do it. So I'm not gonna talk to you much because I gotta get on this, but make sure you subscribe down below. Check the video description for links to products, plans, which there will be plans available for this exact piece in the video description. So check out all that and maybe go follow me on Instagram if you feel so inclined. Now, let's get this thing built.
White snow, red sky.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble. And by rumble, I mean go over the design of the coffee table. Here's what it's going to look like. It's going to have 3 round legs. It's going to be a 60-inch circle. And this is what I'm thinking for the base. This equilateral triangle thingamabob. Now I'm going to do these round legs without a lathe. So if you're thinking, hey, I don't have a lathe, don't worry. You don't need one for this project. All right, enough of the design. Let's get down to brass tacks. What the heck is brass tacks? Everyone's always like, let's get down to brass tacks. What does that even mean? I just said it to be cool. Anyways, since I'm a little bit under a time crunch for this project, the first thing I wanted to do was get my slab all glued up for my tabletop, which meant that before I could do that, I had to properly mill all of my lumber. The key to a perfect tabletop is perfectly milled lumber. So I'm going to walk you through my milling process. First, I just cut a bunch of boards roughly to length until I have enough stock that will net a 60-inch round tabletop. This is more than enough to work with, so I get started. The first step is to run all the pieces through the joiner, just edge joining them. Now I know they're not going to be perfectly square because the board's not square, but I just need a fairly straight edge that I can use to run through the table saw and cut my pieces down to a uniformed width. So I go ahead and do that, like I just said I would. Man, turn your dust collector on, you idiot. After cutting them all to a uniformed width, I go back over to the joiner and I face joint them. Now this is going to give me a perfectly flat surface on one side of the board. With a perfectly flat surface on one side of the board, I can take each board over to the planer. And, you guessed it, get a perfectly flat surface on the opposite side of the board. You gotta go to the joiner first though. If you go straight to the planer, you're not necessarily going to get a perfectly flat surface on both sides. You might end up with some tapered looking weird thing. Then after running all the boards through the planer, I go back over to the joiner, again edge joining each board, and this will be my final perfectly square glue seam. At least, that's what we're hoping. Then I didn't really show you this part, but I cut some of my boards down to a more manageable length. I am cutting a circle, which obviously means that I can have the board shorter on the outsides and longer on the inside. Because, you know, circle shape thing. Anyway, it'll make sense when I put it on there. Just go with me on this. As you can see, with all of my boards perfectly milled, they just slide next to each other like a couple of sunbathing turtles. That didn't really make as much sense as it did in my head. Anyways, once I have all the boards lined up next to each other, I find the center of my overall mass. This is just to make sure that I can still cut a 60-inch circle out of all these pieces. You just want to double check things before you get them all glued up, and then you start cutting and realize, oh crap, I made it too small, which is what we're trying to avoid. But I was good to go, so it was time to glue this whole thing up. Now I get a lot of questions from people saying, do I need biscuits? Do I need dominoes? Do I need dowels when I'm gluing up a tabletop? Well, it depends how good you are at milling up your lumber. Biscuits, dominoes, dowels will do nothing for the overall strength of the tabletop, but they will help with alignment if your boards aren't quite square. Since I spent the time to get all of my boards square, it's super easy just to slap them together with a little glue and throw some clamps on. Easy peasy, let that glue squeezy. Yeah, how you like that one? Anywho, after getting my slab all glued together and held in place with some clamps, I wiped down all the glue seams I could see. I mean, there's nothing I could really do about the bottom at this point, but we'll clean that up later. And then I decided to let that dry while I got started on my equilateral triangular base. Man, I sounded so smart right there. Now, the most important step in making any table base is the milling process. If you don't have properly milled lumber, then you won't have a very good base. Man, I feel like I said this before at some point. Just having a little deja vu. So anyways, holy crap, what the... Ugh. Are you guys okay? Ugh, I did not mean to, I'm sorry. Alright, we're good. Anyways, I start milling up some lumber again. I do the whole joiner thing. I do the whole table saw, cut it to a uniform width thing. I go back over and I face join it again. And yep, you guessed it. I run it through the planer to get it nice and even. And then once more through the joiner just for good measure. And then I go back over to the table saw and I cut it to my final width. For this base, I'm using 1 inch by 4 inch pieces of solid white oak. And I'm gonna put them together something like this in a perfect equilateral triangle. At least, that's my plan. I mean, do you guys think it'll work? I really have no clue. I've never done this before. I'm just making it up as I go. But we'll see. Now, an equilateral triangle means that each angle is equaling 180 degrees, which means I have to cut each piece at 60-degree angle. 60 degrees. Now, this is where a lot of people make mistakes, because they think they have to set their saw to 60 degrees to cut that 60-degree angle. But you see, the board is 90 degrees. See, 90. So if we need 60, we have to remove enough material that will be left with 60. Which means that we don't cut it at 60 degrees, we have to cut off the part that we want to remove, which is, wait for it, 30 degrees, because 30 plus 60 equals 90. So we actually have to cut the angle at 30 degrees to wind up with 60 degrees. Got it? If not, just rewind and listen to that again. I think I did a pretty good job explaining it, if you ask me. So we go over to the chop saw and we set our chop saw to 30 degrees, because we're removing 30 degrees so that we're left with 60 degrees. All right, everybody with me? Okay, so I start by cutting a 30-degree angle on the end of each one of my pre-milled boards, just like this. In case you didn't think I said 30 degrees enough there, I'll just say it again. We cut it at 30 degrees. Yes, it's 60 degrees, but we cut it at 30. So after cutting the end of each one of our boards with that 30-degree angle, I set up a stop on my miter saw fence so that we can make sure each one of these are exactly the same length. Then I flip them around and I cut the exact same angle on the opposite end, making sure it's kind of like a trapezoidal shape. Is that trapezoid or is that a rhombus? I don't remember. I want to say trapezoid. Is the trapezoid the crookedy one or is the rhombus? Anyways, you cut the pieces to make them look like you see right now on your TV screen. And then they should all line up to where the points perfectly touch each other and everything else is nice and even. If they don't line up like that, then you did something wrong. Next, we have to figure out a way to join all these together. Naturally, I decided to go with a half lap joint because, you know, you could just take half the material off one and half off the other and then everything should wind up nice and even. So I traced each board onto the other board. That's probably not the best way to describe that, but basically you want to remove that part and then the opposite part on the other side. And each one of your 3 pieces will be identical. You will cut all of them exactly the same so that they will weave together very nicely. So I go back over to my miter saw and I set up another stop. This one accounting for that 4 inches of material we have to remove for the half lap. Now you might be thinking, wait, how are you going to cut a half lap on your chop saw? Well, my chop saw has this really nice trenching feature where you can control the blade height, and it's not unique to the Festool. A lot of chop saws have it. You just gotta check and see if yours does. I know the DeWalt one does. I'm pretty sure the Bosch one does. Anyways, so after setting my saw blade height so it only cuts halfway through my piece, I cut along my predetermined mark just a nice little reference line. This is just to get the half lap started. I'll do this on all the pieces on both sides, then I can remove the stop and really just go to town. Is this the only way to do this? Absolutely not. It's just quick and easy for me. I can fine tune the adjustment of the chop saw, and I only had, 6 half laps to do. You could do this on a router table, you could do it on the table saw with a dado stack, but the chop saw worked great, so I just went with it. As you can see, I've got a nice half lap on one side, then all you gotta do is flip your board around and do the exact same thing to all your remaining pieces. Then, flat out like a lizard drinking, we are done with all of our half laps. It is time to weave them together. Now I say weave them together because I alternated the side that the half laps are on so that the 3 pieces would kind of weave together, like a basket, or a nice cable knit sweater, or a nice something else that weaves together. Gosh, you just really put me on the spot with these weaving references. Now, if you cut everything correctly and your angles are right, it should fit together with a perfect 60-degree half lap, just like that. Now all you have to do is throw some glue in there, pop on some clamps, and let it sit until it's dry. Oddly enough, when my son was a baby, we used that same method for changing his diapers. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. While we wait for the no, that's not right. While we wait for the glue to dry on our base, we can hop over and start cutting out the circle for our top. So I get all the clamps removed. Definitely don't try cutting a circle with the clamps still on there. That will not be good on your router. Then I flip the entire thing over. We're going to be using a router circle cutting jig thing, so we want to cut it from the bottom because we're going to have to put a tiny hole in the middle of this slab, and you don't want that tiny hole on the top of your table. With the slab flipped over, this is a good opportunity to get rid of all that glue drip that we couldn't get to at the beginning, because it was on the bottom. Then with all the glue scraped off, I like to I thoroughly sand the bottom so that we have a smooth surface for our router jig to ride on. Yeah, I'm pretty BA. And for any children listening, BA stands for booger asteroids. Just ask your parents, they'll know what they are. Once I have everything sanded, I find the center of my slab and I hammer in this little pin that comes with my circle cutting jig. Now my stock circle cutting jig from Rockler wasn't quite long enough to reach my 60-inch diameter, but thankfully I had this homemade one that I made a while back because I needed a longer one. Anyways, whenever I'm cutting out a circle with a router jig, I always like to suspend my extension cord from a hook in the ceiling. Well, the reason is simple. I just don't like getting all twisted up in my cord as I spin around the table. And if you suspend your cord from the ceiling, you don't have to worry about that. This video was sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. They literally have thousands of different classes to choose from. One class that I recently took and thoroughly enjoyed was Video for Instagram, taught by Halise Naveas.
Hi, I'm Halise, a digital storyteller and YouTuber, and ever since I bought my first camcorder at 12, I've been making videos. Whether you want to say a lot or a little, filmmaking is a really strong form of communication.
Another great one was Portrait Photography by Jessica Kobisi.
I really like my photography to defy the expectations of what women are supposed to be. It's really through my poses. I use harsh lighting at times.
The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get 30% off of an annual premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Even if you've already had a free trial of Skillshare, you can still take advantage of this offer to get a full year of unlimited learning and creative exploration. And with everything set up just the way I like it, I started cutting out that circle. Well, I should clarify, I'm not completely cutting out the circle. I know a lot of people like to completely cut out the circle with the router, making multiple passes around and around, but in my experience, the more passes you make with the router, the more likely you are of making a mistake or the router coming loose or messing up your perfect circle. So after making one pass, about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch deep, I cut out the rest of the circle with a jigsaw. Now don't get all worried, I'm not cutting right along my line. I'm just loosely cutting out in that groove I made with the router, leaving a nice little chunky bit on the outside that I will take down here in just a second. With this thing, a bottom bearing mounted flush cut bit. See, that bearing is going to ride on that pre-cut circle that we did with the router jig and remove the remaining material, leaving a perfect circle in its wake, without the fuss or risk of messing the whole thing up by making multiple passes with our circle jig. I mean, you can do it either way. You can cut the whole thing with a circle jig, but just let me warn you, I have had experiences where that circle jig messes up on pass 2 or 3 and your whole thing gets screwed up. So if you want to avoid that and play it safe, just do it this way. One pass, cut it with a jigsaw, and hit it with a flush cut bit. I'm telling you, works every time. With our circle successfully cut out, all we have left to do on our top is sand it smooth. And because of movie magic, I can make it look like it just took me a few seconds, when really I stood there for flipping ever. Anyways, by the time we're done messing around with our circle, the glue on our equilateral triangle base is all set up, and we are ready to get this thing put together. Can you tell I really like saying equilateral triangle base? It just makes me feel special. So the next thing we have to do is figure out our legs. Now, I told you at the beginning that I didn't make these on the lathe. Well, it's true, I bought them online, because you can do that and get perfectly round stock, and you don't have to have the headache of trying to make it yourself. Could I have done it on the lathe? Yes, but I'm trying to make this easier on you guys. I will link the website where I purchased this round stock in the video description. Now, my plan to secure these legs to the base is twofold. Step number 1, drill a hole in each corner of the triangle that is the exact same diameter as the round stock. In this case, it is 2 inches. So I find the center point in each corner of my triangle. Then, with each center point found, all I have to do is chuck up a 2-inch Forstner bit in my drill press and climb inside my triangle. In all reality, this was actually the easiest way to do this. It was really awkward holding it any other way. So sometimes just climb inside that triangle and just get stuff done. And in no time, I had a 2-inch hole drilled in each corner of the triangle. I didn't go all the way through. I left about 1/4 of an inch material for the leg to sit up against. Next, I needed to cut my legs down to size. Now, the client that I'm building this coffee table for requested that this be a ridiculously short coffee table. I mean, crazy short. She only wants it 10 inches off the ground. And before you ask, no, this isn't for my wife. This is for an interior designer that just happens to be my next door neighbor. Yes, Molly, I'm talking about you, you crazy. Why do you want such a short coffee table? Apparently it's this new thing, but seems a little awkward to me. So after cutting all of my legs to size, I stood back and thought, man, this triangle's pointy. I guess all triangles are pointy, but this one just seemed to be pointing right at me and I didn't like it. So using the leg just as a little template, I decided to round over the end of each point on this triangle. As you can clearly see me, what the heck? This is supposed to be a beautiful detailed shot. Move your head out of the way, doofus. Come on. The people want to see what you're doing. Well, you can kind of, if you squint, you can see just I'm removing it just with the jigsaw, just roughly getting close to my line there. Hold on. If you just wait, there'll be another shot. I'm going to flip it around and you'll be able to see better this time. Okay, as you can see, I'm going to take the jigsaw. This is pointless. Cut to the next scene. I once again climbed back inside my triangle, and after roughly cutting with the jigsaw, I just took it over and I sanded down right to my pre-drawn line until each one of those triangular points was not so pointy anymore, you SOBs. And if there's any kids listening, SOB stands for sun, otter pops, and beans, like jelly beans. Ask your parents, they'll know what it means. Then with our triangle a little less pointy, we had to figure out how we were going to attach this base to the underside of the table. I decided to use a few of these little hex bolts right through the base and into the underside of the table. But I wanted to countersink each one of those bolts so that, the head didn't stick out, in case you laid on your belly and looked under this 10-inch table. Like, anyone's really going to see it, but details matter. So I countersunk a little hole just using a Forstner bit, and I just took a little bit off at a time and kept testing it until it was a perfect fit to hide the head of that bolt. Next, I wanted to round over the outside and inside of the entire triangle. I just thought this would help it roll into the underside of the base just a little bit more. But again, this thing's flipping 10 inches off the ground, like anyone's gonna see it. I could have slapped a cardboard box under there and nobody would notice. But alas, I am a woodworker, and even if no one's gonna see it, you still gotta do things the right way. So after completely rounding over the outside, I moved to the inside and then cleaned it up just with a little bit of hand sanding. Now remember when I said my method for hooking these legs on was twofold? Well, step number 1 was drilling the hole. Step number 2 was attaching the leg inside the hole with a gigantor screw. Yes, I will be gluing the leg in place as well, but I wanted to add this 4-inch screw thing. I don't even know what you call this. Giant screw? Big screw? So once again, I countersunk from the top of the base to hide the head of the screw and allow the base to sit flush against the bottom of the table. But before I inserted my screws, I wanted to go ahead and glue each leg in place, making sure that it was nice and square to the base itself. Once the glue was dry, I could flip the whole thing over and inserting my screws would be much easier. I ensured that each leg was square by using not one square, but 2 squares on each side of the leg and repositioned as I needed until it was perfect. Then I just worked my way around the triangle and did the exact same thing to every single leg. Then after waiting a good 30 or 40 seconds to make sure that glue was nice and dry, I'm just joking, it was like at least 5 minutes later, I flipped it over, put it on the ground, and I pre-drilled each leg with a nice long drill bit, just a little bit smaller than my actual screw. I don't know the exact diameter, I didn't look. It's written so small on the end of the drill bit, who can read that? And with each leg pre-drilled, I sank in my screws. Now whenever I'm sinking in long screws like this to hardwood, I always like to go in and out and in and out, going a little bit deeper every time until I just send it home. I don't know if this does anything, it just makes me feel better. And yes, you could make a bunch of weird jokes about that, but this is not that kind of show. So with all of my legs glued and now screwed firmly in place, we still had one more thing to do, and that was to drill our holes to attach the base directly to the bottom of the top. So I took the base over to the top, well, the bottom of the top, you know what I mean, and I laid it on there. Then just using a tape measure, I just kept moving it a little bit this way and a little bit that way and a little bit more this way until it was perfectly centered right in the middle of the circle. Then I took a few of these wood screw clamps and I clamped the base firmly to the top. just to keep it from moving around so that I could drill all the holes needed for my threaded inserts. Now you're probably thinking, why are you not just drilling directly into your top for your threaded inserts? Because if you drill through the base, then that hole is going to be really big for your screw to pass through. Aha, exactly. I want to drill an oversized hole in the base to allow for wood movement. So it works out perfectly because I can just drill right through the base into the top, reducing blowout in the base, and at the same time perfectly lining up my holes for my threaded insert. So very carefully I drill all of my holes, making sure not to go too far, and drill right through the top of your table. That would not be good. With all of our holes drilled, I removed the base and it was time to insert our threaded inserts. If you've never installed threaded inserts before, it is a super easy process. Once you have the hole drilled, I just apply a small amount of super glue to the insert itself, and then just using a hex key, the right size for whatever insert you're using, you just spin that thing in until it is just below the upper surface of, whatever piece of wood you're putting it in. So I did this 6 times because I had 6 holes. Round and round, glue here, glue there, until they were all done. Then I just hit the top, or the bottom rather, with a sander real quick just to remove any super glue that might have squeezed out during this process. Next, we had to test and make sure that everything still lined up the way it was supposed to, and that our bolts would screw in nicely to those threaded inserts. So I just inserted each screw and spun it around until it stopped. I guess these aren't screws. Isn't a screw pointy and a bolt's flat on the end? I guess they'd be bolts, but whatever. It's a metal thing with threads on it, and you stick it in the insert and spin it around, just like this. And boom, our base is firmly attached to our tabletop. At this point, we are completely done with the actual construction of the table. This is it. This is what it's going to look like. All we have to do now is put some finish on it. And I bet you can guess. It's white oak. What other type of finish do you think I would put on this thing? Of course, I'm using Rubio Monocoat Cotton White. But to be completely fair, this time it's not my fault. That's what the client specifically asked for, so I'm just doing what I'm told, so don't get too mad at me. I started by finishing the bottom of the tabletop first, and then once that was done, I switched over and finished the base of the table. Got Rubio smeared all over the base, and then I reattached the base to the bottom of the table. Once that was nice and secure and everything was finished and looking the way it was supposed to, I called my favorite person on the planet, my wife. She's also the only person that's ever home when I need help lifting something heavy. And she helped me flip the table over and set it on the floor. Just wait till you guys see how ridiculously short this thing is. I mean, it's low, like really, really low. Look at that. It's like a glorified stepping stool. But it's what the client wanted. You guys at home can make this any size you want. If it was me, I'd add another 3 or 4 inches to those legs and jack it up. But the design is still there, and you gotta do what the client wants. So with finish on the bottom and the base, I rubbed a nice coat of Rubio Monocoat Cotton White on the top of the table, and just like that, it was done. A 2-day project that came out pretty nice, if not a little short. But hey, you can't fault me for doing what I'm told.
Well, there you go. Whoever said you can't build a piece of furniture in 2 days was just crazy, because as you can see, we did it. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you learned something new. If you liked it, please subscribe down below and check the video descriptions for links to products I used in this video, link to my website where you can get cool merchandise. plans for this very coffee table so you can build it yourself. And if you want to support my channel even further, click on the Patreon link and sign up over on Patreon for some cool perks. All right, take care now.